today's presentation is really an extension of our prior webinar, the Enterprise Data Model, Enhancing Generative AI with Business Knowledge. Before we get into the details of this, I want to just do a little bit of review to kind of set the context. So entity relationship modeling's heritage is really one of language or semantic modeling, just as knowledge modeling is. And indeed, entity relationship modeling, UML, and knowledge graph all share the same constructs of knowledge. And that's really the subject, predicate, and object, verb phrase, phrasing of one entity to another, along with the definitions of those things. From E.F. Codd, who believed that database tables should be informative to users, to Peter Chen, who invented ER modeling in order to incorporate the semantics of the real world into the business, into the model, to Clyde Finkelstein, who extended ER modeling into information engineering, the focus has really always been about business knowledge modeling. So we're going to apply that vision to medallion architecture today and see what the benefits are. So as we move through this discussion of medallion architecture capability, remember that we're modeling language or narrative of function as the basis for data structure. Language is how we discern and visualize the patterns we see, the patterns that we don't see or can't see. And data is created according to the invisible patterns set by business processes. Our business knowledge model graphically organizes that narrative according to the actions performed. And the model's graphics are, with it, the semantics mimic the structure of business function. And that's really central to the way we model. We create true data architecture when our data story is fully aligned with business's functional story. Data structure and engineering, data structuring and engineering patterns do not define an architecture. Alignment of solution with the business defines the architecture. So knowledge modeling, the business architecture, begins by establishing the identity of business function as action performed. We further distinguish function specialization to define the exact context in which descriptive characteristics or attributes, as well as business actions represented by relationships, apply. And then next we give these functions the context of business, context of process by modeling business process events, which we'll see some examples of in a few slides here. And finally, the business relationships are narrated according to the actions of business process. The entire business architecture model is a structured narrative of function, implemented in graphics and annotated in order to document, correct, and validate our understanding of the business pattern that data must mirror to be effective. The ability to formulate the narrative is really key to our ability to structure the model correctly and utilize it in data architecture, data governance, and generative AI, which is generative AI in particular is very, the semantics are very important in generative AI. So if we want a union across all of those and the benefits of that union, you know, this is the approach that we take.
What sort of benefits would we see of that union, Don?
Well, let's talk about the obvious ones in terms of generative AI and data architecture. We really the LLM needs business knowledge in order to understand how the business operates and the natural description of the business that ultimately it needs to provide the business, right? And if our data architecture, if our medallion architecture is built on built on that same semantic model, then suddenly it becomes very easy for the LLM to incorporate enterprise data into generative AI function, right? And to the extent that it doesn't, now we have to add additional semantics to explain how to transform or translate a particular data solution into that description. That's one way. The other way is with the data governance. We really want the machine, the LLM, and the humans in the organization to be utilizing the same definition of data, the same understanding of the business. And so everybody's on the same page, right? So once again, we are really able to unify our data architecture, the data governance that manages that data architecture, right, and oversees it, and that kind of thing, with the generative AI side of the generative AI function.
So we've got a framework that's business people and the real world. We've got the machines, we've got the data governance people. Everyone's working on the same framework. Everyone's following the same rules, the same definitions, the same structures.
Right.
Nice.
Exactly. Now, medallion architecture. Oh, did I skip a slide? Yes, I did. My apologies. So here's an illustration of the ideas from the prior slide. And what we see here is we define the claims action as a request for compensation by one or more claimants for financial loss. And we see that the claim exposure identifies the base of claim obligation for loss. Further, the model distinguishes specialization of the claim to support 3 different insurance contract types, as well as surety bonds and policies, based on the standing of each of the classes of contracts. The model also illustrates important business process events based on completion of process steps that adjudicate the claim, right? So the model not only gives the data attribution business process context, but it also provides a basis for event analytics in the solution. So we can literally create event-based tables in association, and you'll see some of that in our example that we directly consume and use in order to create star schemas. And just as important as these features of the knowledge model, narrate the expression of business process action in the predicated verb phrasing of the relationships establishing the semantic foundation of the knowledge model. For instance, claim exposure establishes standing for a loss unit according to the applicable policy coverage, and the loss incident requests compensation for one or more claimants from damages arising from the loss incident. So relationships are really the expression of business function and part of the taxonomy of business function. So stating robust verb phrasing is really essential to business alignment, model validation, as well as communication of business function. Now, medallion architecture is necessary because system automation doesn't reflect the real world. And system data, because system data is really organized according to data processing expediencies and really the engineering of the way the engineers decided to build that system. The illustration on the left is from the insurance industry, which I work a good deal in, as well as several others, demonstrating guidewire claim centers, a notion of a claim function. It performs all of the data entry, all of the processing, focused solely on adjudicating the claim, which makes the claim the center of the model and the center of the center of that system. But this provides just a very narrow operational view of claims and a narrow operational reporting capability. Business is strategically interested in the loss incident as the cause for the claim, and also in the recovery actions that mitigate some of those claim losses. And they're also very interested in the litigations and the risk of litigation used to settle some of those claims. On the right is a partial real-world narrative of the claim function. A single loss incident with damages and or casualties is the cause of one or more claims. A damaged asset or casualty of the loss incident in combination with the standing of the policy coverage is the basis of the claim exposure. It's the semantics of the business function that leads us really to a greater capability than mere operational reporting provides us, and the standard view of the system provides. And so the heavy lift here is really to take that operational view, which has most of this data, and transform it into something that is actually capable of delivering the information functions that we're interested in. There's a complex set of needs that make medallion architecture necessary for a number of enterprises. Because of the union of form and function, which means that a design form both enables function, but because of its form, it also limits function. No single data organization is capable of delivering all the features demanded of a strategic data solution. We all understand that the bronze tier of the architecture, the actual data lake, is organized according to source systems, incorporates the history of source system changes. Medallion architecture is a direct response to the limitations of the data lake's data organization. The per use heavy data wrangling and subsequent inconsistencies in that wrangling deters direct consumption by most users, right? So the silver tier of the architecture is really central to the medallion's capability. It harmonizes data across functionally overlapping systems to a human action pattern. It maintains the history of change of the business function description over time, and it's relational and therefore consumption neutral, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a few moments. And because it's relational, it's highly flexible and highly extensible. And as with all design forms, though, it's limited. It has limits. To use it, one needs to have a pretty good understanding of the business architecture, and it requires more compute, more complex queries, more complex query optimization, as well as greater compute. So the architecture has the gold tier, because the gold tier is really all the things that the silver isn't, but it's also none of the things that the silver is, right? Because its design form is also limited. It's easy to use for business measurement with decreased query complexity and compute. But it's also inflexible in terms of consumption because of the denormalizations and rules baked into its information, really limit it to the use cases that drove it. And it can be very resistant to extension and modification if not part of the kind of medallion architecture we're talking about today. So architectural method requires that we first identify needed outcomes and capabilities. Then determination of features that support those capabilities. And finally, design form that delivers those features. In my mind, there's only 3 capabilities that make medallion architecture valuable. One is self-service business discovery. The second is enterprise consistency of information delivery. And in the long term, rapid response to evolving business needs. Self-service business discovery and the ability to answer one-off business questions can really only be delivered by the silver tier of the architecture because of its relational business organization. The relational design it does not have use case to it. It's just descriptive of the business function, and therefore it's neutral to business questions. And so it's wide open. Anything that the model describes in terms of function can be interrogated and questions asked of it in relationship to other things, as long as we're willing to write the query to do it. For this reason, its data organization, though, has to be consumable by power users. Performance is not a factor here, but it's important that users aren't burdened with complex data manipulations any more than just writing a normal query that joins across data. And it goes without saying that use of data engineers as go-betweens isn't self-service. So, which we see a lot in a number of these implementations. So to do direct, to be directly consumable, data generated by system automation has to be translated to describe human actions. This is really the heavy lift in the architecture in the silver tier that's performed once for consistency across all consumption. Human action, the human action pattern is also the basis of data harmonization for functionally overlapping systems, since these systems automate those human actions. So the human action is present. It just has to be liberated from the system by transformation. And with the transformation of the system to human action, and the harmonization of the enterprise data across multiple lines of business, we bring consistency to business measurement. The silver tier, a silver tier that is directly consumable by power users and harmonizes enterprise data to human action patterns, is also naturally supports efficient casting of business descriptive data into business measurement. We'll talk a bit more about that, and that's actually the subject of our example a little later in the presentation here. And it's not just efficiency of data flow, but efficiency of gold tier development, which includes the ETL. And with that efficiency, we're able to eliminate the stovepiping that we see in traditional Kimball solutions.
So, Don, there's the data lake. It's really popular for people to be able to sort of just do that odd ad hoc reporting and analysis, those one-off business questions. And, so would you say that the silver tiers model makes it the only component of the architecture that can support that, and why?
Well, the data lake supports operational reporting centering around the system organization. So you can do very operational reporting there, but the minute you try to do anything that tries to cross systems or integrates any kind of complex integration across systems, it becomes very cumbersome to do, right? And if you want an enterprise perspective, let's say in the insurance industry where I have multiple quote and policy admin systems, and we're going to see this in a moment, that becomes, getting that harmonized view becomes very difficult. So I find that data scientists don't even like to go there, even though we often say that that's the place that data scientists go, because there's so much data wrangling involved, right? So if we transform and harmonize that data in the silver tier of the architecture to that human action pattern based on commonality of function, while also supporting specialization of function, say for different lines of business, then we're able to actually perform that kind of ask those kinds of one-off questions, that we haven't provisioned, that are not provisioned in the star schemas in the gold tier of the architecture yet, right? Or we may never provision because those questions are not asked very often, or the business comes up with just a completely off the wall question that they need a one-time answer to, right? And we see a lot of this from executives. So what I've seen a lot of is that somebody asks a question and somebody's got to go out and start trying to put together data if they don't have such a solution as this kind of medallion architecture that we're talking about.
So the silver layer is offering a safe space for engineers to be able to create answers on well-documented, well-defined, governed, cleansed, pre-prepared data.
Yeah, and really key is it is translated, and part of the specification for doing all that cleansing and all of those operations is it's translated to reflect not a system automation pattern, but a human action pattern that human action pattern is really if the business is not looking at their business through the lens of their systems, which they should not be, right? They should be understanding their business through their business architecture. Those human actions and the patterns thereof are really the stimulus for the business questions that they're asking. And so when we conform data to that, and we harmonize data to that pattern, right, it becomes a very natural place to ask all of those, to do business discovery and to ask those one-off questions. Great question, though. Thank you. So this slide depicts two ideas about the business knowledge model. You can call it a business data model if you like. I refer to it as a business knowledge model because the knowledge that we're talking about is useful for a variety of uses, as we said in generative AI. But that same semantic knowledge, as Peter Chen and Clive Finkelstein intended it, was intended to drive data solutions as well. But there's two concepts where we are depicting here. First is the idea that the business knowledge model is used for creating silver tier, and most people think, oh yeah, it's relational. Silver tier is relational, natural fit. But it's also, you'll see how we use it for creating and shaping the gold tiers, star schema models and flattened structures. And then second, we never create such a model from scratch if we can help it. We try to start with an industry business knowledge model like AUDM, which has a narrative semantic foundation, and we use a variety of other inputs to gain knowledge of the business architecture, to adapt it to the client's business and their business architecture, such as other internal models, documentation, as well as research. And then we work with business SMEs as well, and reconciliation of system content to further adapt the model. The resulting knowledge model provides the relational business pattern for creating the silver tier. And then we take that same model and we further apply consumption use cases and reporting requirements to shape the same business model into the gold tier star schemas. And so because the star schemas really have to be built based on the same relational patterns, the denormalizations are constructed on the same patterns, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Medallion architecture's purpose is architectural enablement of the business, where the architecture is not about structure, but really is design that fulfills business need. The business architecture pattern is a foundation for ensuring our data architecture is truly descriptive of human actions animating the business. And on that foundation, we build the pillars of information function that support business capabilities that enable the business strategy. So really key, this is really classic, not just top down, but just it makes so much sense. Everything we do in the information architecture really is about enabling a set of business capabilities, or should be tied, because those are the value drivers, and those are about supporting the business strategy. Now, an architect always ensures the solution recommended is what's truly needed by the client. Medallion architecture is a very expensive undertaking. The benefit of the system must answer specific business needs to justify its high cost. And the conditions that drive it must be present for it to have value. So some of those conditions include the same content is used across multiple star schemas. So transforming data once brings consistency, agreement, and efficiency to creating the star schemas. The business interpretations of very heavy lift, which may be increased by the need to further harmonize multiple functionally overlapping systems. And keep in mind that including such complex harmonization in combination with the use case driven design as part of the same data stream is often problematic. And what I see is it often does not happen. And we get star schemas that are really still more system oriented than they are business human action oriented. And then finally, the business needs that consumption neutral data store for discovery and one-off business questions. Kimball bus architecture is really a valid solution for clients with less complex needs. And so we can't just be, as an architect, we just can't be a one pattern architect. We have to be able to deliver multiple forms of solutions that actually align with the client's needs. Oops, sorry, wrong direction. So sometimes I'm asked, is there a difference between Inman data warehouse and Medallion architecture? There really isn't much difference. They both attempt to deliver the same kind of outcomes. They're built for the same reasons because of the limitations of model forms and data organizations. And the need for the need to apply multiple forms in order to address complex business needs. And they both need to tell the same human action story to accomplish that, right? So there's a few differences potentially. Traditionally, data warehousing When I used to practice data warehousing, we had a transient staging area where the medallion architecture is part of a data lake house, so it has this perpetual staging area called the data lake. And model approaches are somewhat different, or traditional model approaches versus I see a good deal of data vault in medallion architecture today.
That was a question that came up a few times. Is when we're talking about the silver layer, everything so far you're talking about a third normal form approach to that, driven by the business. Well, everything that Dan Lindstedt talks about with Data Vault, same sort of thing, but the only difference is the sort of schema system is the Data Vault schema system. So can you just slot Data Vault straight into the middle of this?
So you can build the data vault. So one of the value propositions of our semantic models is the data vault the business vault in particular needs to be based on business semantics, right? And so you can use our models as a pattern for both establishing the hub backbone for the business vault, as well as the specifications for the business vault satellite tables, right? Now, the issue, I've been talking about three characteristics or things we're trying to accomplish. The question you have to ask yourself is does the data vault model in Silver, does that actually support direct consumption by power users, right? And what kind of impact does that have, or do we lose that capability, right? And then the other question is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes is efficiency. Some of the efficiencies in taking data from the Silver and casting it or shaping it into the gold. So we're going to see that. So, and I would ask the same questions about generalized models and how much, whether or not those make this kind of solution easier to consume directly and easier to cast, into star schemas, or whether or not they introduce any kind of complexity in that process. So the point is that Data Vault has its benefits, just like models have their benefits. As I said, every design form has a trade-off, an enabler, a thing that it enables, and a thing that it limits. You have to choose it based on what your outcome, what outcomes you want. As I said, this actually focuses on, this kind of solution focuses on enabling self-service for discovery in the Silver model, and open to any business question, one-off business questions not developed, that gold model has not been developed for. And I'm surprised I'm getting those messages, because I thought I turned off Teams, so that might be part of my problem. Anyways, moving on. So we're going to look now at how the business knowledge model can significantly enhance medallion architecture functionality, and that's what we're really talking about here, is what this particular model form does for us if we build the medallion architecture using this method, using the business knowledge model as the pattern. In the insurance industry, Guidewire is really common. It's almost ubiquitous now. There's probably two different current systems out there, Guidewire Duck Creek, and I think Guidewire has a little bit larger market share of the new implementations. There's a lot of very old, much older implementations of other systems and homegrown systems, including mainframe, and all of which we have to kind of bring together as part of the enterprise view. But the two modules within Guidewire are Policy Center and Claims Center. So policy data in Policy Center is really functionally overloaded, supporting submissions, policy quotes, and policies. Many systems, such as SAP, overload system tables. So SAP order tables, the SAP order table contains both sales orders, quotes, contracts, and returns. And it's very difficult to ask business questions of that kind of system without deep system knowledge, and the same is true of Guidewire. But Guidewire goes one step further, and it overloads individual records based on a progression of the sales process. And an individual record can represent a submission, a quote, and a policy, depending on whether the submission requested for the quote was approved for quoting activity and whether or not the quote resulted in a policy. So Guidewire is just one of those examples. Other vendors, as I said, have different patterns of processing expedients, and all of them have to be harmonized with Guidewire in order to provide an enterprise analysis capability, which is why large insurance firms utilize either a traditional Inman data warehouse or medallion architecture. So we contrast that system automation pattern of the prior slide with human action pattern. And this diagram is a partial conceptualization of the business function. We harmonize Guidewire Policy Center to, as well as quoting other quote and policy admin systems. The language elements that we call data attributes are really the characteristics and properties of these functions. In the upper right is a partial logical model of submissions and quote function. And that we're using in today's example. The physical model in the lower left is a relational consolidation of that logical model, supporting the logical model's semantics of pure business function. And because our physical model solution is created from that description of business function, power users are able to directly interrogate the model according to their knowledge of the business architecture. And it also makes it very easy to create a data stream to populate the star schema, as we're going to talk about next. So on the right, we see the organization of the business knowledge model laid out according to a flow of relational dependency. Also, we see the frame around the functional scope of the submission fact, and the flow of the relational dependency is the basis of denormalizations we bake into the submission fact table seen on the left. The point of planning the star schema this way is to ensure that a business measurement is fully aligned with business function that's the subject of measurement. In both the silver and gold tiers, this modeling ensures that the business description and the business measurement reflect the same patterns of human action that stimulate business questions, and that's really central to all data function. This is one of the reasons why we model this way. And I plan star schemas this way, whether I'm working with medallion architecture or not, or whether I'm working with Kimball bus architecture. If you're fortunate enough to use ER Studio, as your modeling tool, you can use the roll up and roll down denormalization functions to create most of the physical model denormalizations seen in this particular fact and dimensional model. The impact of creating both silver and gold on a common knowledge model is pretty huge. Populating the gold tier is straightforward denormalization shaping according to the relationships of the silver model. And this is the example. This is an example of the code that actually populated that particular silver model, or a small subset of the code. And the rest of the code really follows this very same pattern. It just uses a set of left outer join denormalizations following the relationship pathways of the model in order to build out, in order to really, starting with the submission as the driving table, to join to quotes and denormalize quotes into the submission fact, and then denormalize the submission and quote events to a series of counters, counts, durations, and amount metrics. With the business model as a starting point, it took about 2 days to plan and create the fact table with the definition of the metrics. And using the silver model, silver physical model, and the knowledge model, it took 3 days to write the code to populate the submission fact and another day to test. So in 6 days, we stood up a single fact table providing enterprise sales metrics. And think about what that really means, given that most large insurers have to conform multiple quote and policy admin systems together for all of their lines of business, So all of this is based on unifying both the silver and gold tier architecture on the semantic structure of the business knowledge. And then finally, we'll end the presentation with the pitfalls of an inadequate architecture. And that inadequate architecture is not just a lack of structure. It's not sourced from a lack of structure, but instead misalignment of solution features with business need. And you can see that manifested in 3 ways. One is that the business lacks trust in the solution or doesn't find it answers their questions. That leads to shadow IT in the business. And I've actually seen several user revolts in my career when solutions weren't designed for business need, but were what the engineers wanted to deliver. The second is an inability to adapt to new and changing requirements, as well as limits on functionality, which is manifested by the change cycle lagging the business cycle, as well as star schema stovepiping. And then finally, solutions are operationally focused based on a lack of harmonization, which makes it difficult to answer strategic business questions. And this is probably the biggest issue of all, because I've seen organizations that their solutions could only answer, they're only built for operational use, and all you could think of is the missed opportunities of being able to answer some of those strategic business questions and use the data for a greater purpose than operational reporting.
So, Don, three takeaways for these guys about the use of a business model to drive medallion architecture. Then, what are the 3 takeaways that everyone should go away with?
Well, one takeaway is that by using it, using the medallion, or using the business knowledge model of the business architecture, we can understand the human action pattern rather than being so we naturally get focused on existing structures. So what I see a lot of is that modelers become kind of fixated on the system patterns, and they understand everything through the system pattern or on a solution they previously developed. And so what the business architecture model is, it breaks that. The business narrative is the thing that we focus on, and by doing that, we can make sure that our systems are naturally aligned with the business actions that actually stimulate business questions, right? And so we're able to actually build a solution like that enables far more functionality than we would otherwise have, which is, that ability to do discovery by power users within the silver tier of the architecture and answer those one-off business questions, as well as to be able to naturally be able to very rapidly respond to changing information and data use requirements in order to adapt our gold tier, our star schemas to current business needs. So, and that's a little longer term. It does take a little bit to build these up fronts, but once you have the data in the silver tier of the architecture, delivering star schema is extremely rapid as long as the data is there. So we can cast that same data multiple different ways and gain huge consistency across all of those star schemas in agreement with them, instead of having different rules baked into different business interpretation rules of the system data, presented in different star schemas, and the disagreement that we see across those.
Yeah, I think for me the big one is consistency, and doing all this in ER Studio, having that sort of central enterprise model kind of drives everything. So in ER Studio, we can harvest a business glossary from it and kickstart the governance program from it. We can do all our application design, application database design from it, our messaging infrastructure. Everything sort of centers around it. We've got consistency across all those different initiatives.
Well, there's a number of other things about ER Studio that really make this this palatable. And the reason why we partner with Idea on ER Studio is that these are significant models, so you need team development capability, right? I don't know if your competitors don't. It allows a single model to be used, a single logical model to be used as a common source for all of the solutions, so that single model can generate and be used for creation of multiple kinds of physical tables, and then the roll up and roll down functionality. No one else has that. That's tremendous. And then also we're constantly doing mechanically, this is mechanics, but we're constantly doing compare merges to maintain our logical model and keep it in sync with our physical models, and as well as and then cross model, compare merging. So compare merge works really well in ER Studio compared to the competition's capability. So I just find the tool, it's a huge, it makes modeling hugely efficient. I mean, I can't say enough things about ER Studio, and that's an unpaid
checks in the post. Very good. Yeah. Hey, just there's a great question here. So data mesh is massively popular at the moment. And one of the questions was, given the focus on the human action pattern, they're wondering if Accenture has overlaid the principles of domain and data products modeling needed to support a data mesh.
Well, data mesh, and then also the notion of data fabric. You really want the products you develop to still be aligned, even though that you may be you're creating for. It's just like it's just like a star schema. You want agreement across everything you do, and what we provide is the business semantics for everything that you're going to do, whether it's in data mesh, data fabric, or in traditional medallion architecture, right? So that's the whole point. Is we're not about an individual solution with these models. They are solution agnostic. They are intended to give you the business semantics, the functional human action pattern that data describes, right? So that you can use that across any application, whether it's data mesh, data fabric, medallion architecture, generative AI, or taking the definition that we have, because the way we author definition is in the context of the business architecture model. That creates such a superior business glossary definition. I see so many business glossaries, and I kind of ask the question, why? What we produce in these models is really in tune with the description of human actions that the things that data describe really are. So
great. And I think we could do a whole session just on data mesh. I mean, your models provide that sort of set of foundational data products that could then be and the sort of blueprint on how those foundational products then fit together, and that then can be sort of implemented directly into the silver layer, giving you your consistent structure. Good. I think we've run out of time. We've already gone over the hour. Anything else that you wanted to say, Don, before we wrap up?
No, I just it'd be curious to know if there's an interest in understanding how these kinds of models are performed and done. One of the things that we're looking at doing internally is in Accenture training around semantic modeling as but it's applicable to ontology modeling. Or
Don, you broke up again.
Am I breaking up again?
You are, yeah. So I'm going to wrap it up. The last, I think, the point you were making is around sort of semantic modeling, and there was a question about how the semantic layer fits into the medallion architecture. Can it replace silver gold? I think we can probably do a whole session on that as well. How does the semantic model, the business glossary, this model all fit together? And yeah, good. Mm-hmm. On that note, thank you everybody for attending. As I said, we'll be sending out an email to everybody with a copy of the PowerPoint and the recording. Do contact us if you've got any questions on any of this. We can show you how ER Studio can support all this directly. Thank you very much for joining us.